Welcome to this explainer. Today we're zeroing in on February 24th, 1525, the Battle of Pavia. Honestly, this goes down as one of the absolute most devastating defeats in all of French history. We aren't just talking about a lost battle here. This was a massive clash that literally changed the face of European warfare forever. It proved once and for all that the romantic era of the armored knight was over, and the gritty, deafening, and chaotic age of gunpowder had officially arrived.
So, how did the capture of one single man manage to change Europe forever? Well, we're going to explore exactly how King Francis I's disastrous defeat of Pavia reshaped the entire geopolitical map. It really served as this brutal pivot point, the exact moment where the medieval world crashed headfirst into a terrifying new technological reality.
Of all things, nothing remains to me but honor and my life, which is saved. Just let that sink in for a second. That haunting line was sent by a captive King Francis directly to his mother, right after the dust had settled. It immediately establishes the sheer scale of the tragedy here. The King of France, alive, but a prisoner of his enemies. Unbelievable. Section 1. Gunpowder versus chivalry. Let's dive in. Okay, so during the Italian Wars, armies were caught in this messy, awkward period of transition. It was pitting the romantic chivalry of the Old World right up against gritty, pragmatic technology. On one side, you've got the glittering, massively expensive French heavy cavalry, the gendarmes, decked out in full plate armor. And opposite them, the comparatively humble Imperial soldiers, Spanish troops and German Landsknechte, wielding matchlock firearms called arquebusiers, all backed up by massive bristling walls of pikes. Now, on paper, the French actually held the edge in sheer cavalry numbers, and they brought a staggering 60 heavy cannon to the field. That's a lot of firepower. But Charles V's Habsburg Imperial side possessed an absolutely critical advantage: the quality of their infantry and their widespread, devastating use of the arquebus. And as you'll see, the way these forces were actually utilized on the ground made all the difference in the world. Section 2. The Siege and the Trap. To really understand how this clash unfolded, we've got to look at the geography. Francis I had marched south into Lombardy and pinned the imperial forces inside the city of Pavia. But a relief army was on the way. To make matters worse, the wet winter weather had swollen the Vernavola River, which effectively split the French besieging army into these isolated little pockets. Troops on the east couldn't easily communicate with or support the guys on the west. They were just locked in place, creating a massive vulnerability. Desperate for supplies and, frankly, money, the imperial commanders decided to go for broke. On the night of February 23rd, they actually faked a retreat just to cover up the noise of their true maneuver. Under the cover of total darkness, Spanish sappers painstakingly hacked away and breached the walls of the Visconti hunting park. By the time dawn rolled around, thousands of Imperial arquebusiers had slipped right inside and totally surprised the French garrison at Mirabello Castle. Section 3. The Dawn Massacre. So picture this. A thick morning fog is completely masking the Imperial advance. The French artillery opens up, and initially they start tearing through the enemy ranks. It's looking good for France. But then Francis, ever so eager for knightly glory, launches this massive, impetuous cavalry charge. And here's the kicker. By riding directly in front of his own 60 cannons, he completely blocks his artillery from firing. He literally silenced his greatest tactical advantage just to chase personal glory. And the results? An absolute slaughter. Stripped of their artillery support, the elite French men-at-arms charged right into muddy, swampy terrain and tall grass. The Imperial arquebusiers simply scattered into the woods, took cover, and fired point blank. Their heavy lead shot easily punched right through the lavish, expensive Italian-made plate armor of the French nobility. The absolute flower of French chivalry was shredded in a matter of minutes. Section 4. The Capture and the Fallout. The real horrific climax of the battle, though, centered on the king himself. Surrounded near the Repentita farmhouse, Francis I literally had his horse killed right out from under him. Now, to his credit, he fought bravely on foot, swinging his sword, but he was quickly overwhelmed. He was taken prisoner by 3 Spanish knights. I mean, think about that. An extraordinary, almost unthinkable event that sent shockwaves rippling across the battle lines and soon across all of Europe. Obviously, with their king captured, the French lines completely collapsed. And the tragedy somehow gets even worse. The Duke of Alençon sees the battle turning and decides to flee across the Ticino River. Once his men were safely across, the French command actually cut their own pontoon bridge. Thousands of their retreating Swiss mercenary allies, who were being relentlessly hunted down by Spanish light cavalry,
basically had no choice but to throw themselves into the river, drowning in the freezing, strong current. 8,000. Just take a moment to let that number sink in. That staggering figure represents the French soldiers and their allies who lost their lives in barely 2 hours of fighting. 2 hours! It was an absolutely apocalyptic loss for the French military machine. And we actually still see the echoes of this extreme violence today. Modern archaeological digs at the battlefield site have uncovered a seriously grim physical legacy. We're talking shattered pieces of beautifully decorated armor mixed in with heaps of skeletons. And these remains, they show terrible blunt force trauma from pikes and swords, right alongside these deadly, unmistakable entry wounds from the lead arquebus shot. It really hammers home the reality of this devastating technological shock. So, what does this all mean for the map of Europe? Well, the immediate geopolitical fallout was the Treaty of Madrid in 1526. Signed by a captive Francis, it was this deeply humiliating concession that firmly established Spanish and Habsburg dominance over Italy for generations. Now, sure, Francis would later repudiate it the literal second he was free, but the damage to French influence was well and truly done. European politics had been fundamentally reshaped. But beyond the politics, the cultural impact was just profound. The imperial victory was immortalized in these massive, epic tapestries woven by Bernard van Orly using actual gold and silver threads, which, by the way, you can still see touring museums today. Meanwhile, French chroniclers like Martin du Bellay deeply lamented this cruel battle that totally wiped out their nobility. Ultimately, Pavia didn't just end a military campaign, it completely shattered the centuries-old myth of the invincible, armored knight forever. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. We look back at knights charging into gunfire as, well, kind of foolish, right? But it was a period of incredibly disruptive transition. Now, consider how warfare continues to evolve today with drones, cyber weapons, and AI. Are we truly prepared for our next great technological disruption? Or are we too just waiting to charge headfirst into the fire? It's something to think about. Keep learning, stay curious, and thanks so much for exploring this fascinating piece of history with me today.